It's funny how a life, an entire lifetime of love, sacrifice, and quiet devotion can be dismantled in a single second. It doesn't take a bomb. It doesn't take a car crash. Sometimes, all it takes is 4 little words spoken by the right person with just the wrong amount of casual cruelty. I remember the dust motes dancing in the afternoon sunlight in my living room. It was a Tuesday. The house was quiet, that expectant sort of quiet before a big event. I had the phone pressed to my ear, my heart already doing that little anxious flutter it always did when I called my son, Max. I was just calling to ask a simple question, a mother's question. "When is the wedding, sweetheart? I need to know for the florist." The silence on the other end lasted just a beat too long. Then I heard her voice. Not Max's, Lena's, my daughter-in-law. Even now, years later, I can close my eyes and see her face as clearly as if she were standing right here. I could practically hear the chilling, tight little smile in her voice through the phone line. "Oh," she said, so casually, like she was telling me they'd decided to order pizza instead of Chinese food. "Oh, we already got married yesterday, Renata." The world stopped. The dust motes stopped dancing. My blood seemed to stop flowing in my veins. "Yesterday?" I whispered. My voice sounded foreign to my own ears, thin, reedy. "Yeah," she continued, her tone breezy, completely devoid of any empathy. "It was small, intimate. You know how it is." And then came the words that would echo in my nightmares, the words that would slice through 35 years of motherhood like a hot knife. She paused, and I could almost feel her savoring the cruelty of it before she delivered the final blow. "We only invited special people." Let the words hang in the air. Special people. The phone felt suddenly enormous in my hand, heavier than a cinder block, weighing down my arm, weighing down my entire soul. I stood there, frozen in the middle of my own living room, the living room I owned, but rarely sat in because I was always working, always saving. Special people. The words hit me like a physical blow, like a bucket of ice water thrown into my face in the dead of winter. The shock was so intense it was almost painless at first, just a numb, buzzing void in my brain. Special people. My mind, desperate to make sense of this, started reeling backward in time, a chaotic slideshow of the last 3 years. I thought about the 3 years I had paid their rent, $500 every single month, like clockwork. $500 I took from my small pension so they could live in a nice apartment in a trendy neighborhood. I thought about the furniture. That beautiful, expensive sectional sofa Lena had just had to have. The one I bought. The one she was probably sitting on right now as she delivered this news to me. I thought about their refrigerator. How many times had I driven over there on a Sunday evening, unlocking their door with the key they gave me, the key I thought meant trust, only to find their fridge empty? How many hundreds of dollars in groceries had I quietly stocked on their shelves, making sure they had fresh vegetables, good meat, their favorite snacks, so they wouldn't go hungry? Apparently, landlords who pay the rent aren't special. People who buy the furniture aren't special. Mothers who ensure their grown children are fed aren't special. I was not a special person. I looked across the room toward the hallway closet. The door was slightly ajar. I could see the sleeve of the dress, that pale, dusty pink dress. It was silk. Beautiful. I had spent $200 on it, a fortune for me these days. I had agonizingly picked it out, trying it on 3 different times in the store, looking in the mirror and thinking, yes, this is the one. I won't embarrass Max in this. I'll look nice in the wedding photos. I had imagined the photos. Me, standing next to my handsome son, his arm around my shoulder, smiling that smile he used to give me when he was little. The dress hung uselessly in the dark closet now, along with the new shoes that still had the price tags on the soles, along with the $1,000 cash I had hidden in my jewelry box, saved penny by penny, intended as their wedding gift. Along with the illusion, the pathetic, desperate illusion, that I was important, that I mattered, that I was part of the most important day of my only son's life. All of it, the planning, the excitement, the calls to my sister Diana in Chicago bragging about the upcoming nuptials, All of it collapsed into dust in a single second, pulverized by those 4 poisoned words. Only special people. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of me just breathing shallowly into the receiver, Max came on the line. He must have taken the phone from Lena. "Mom?" His voice sounded strange, rehearsed, like he was reading from a script Lena had written for him. He wasn't looking at me, he couldn't see me, but I knew, with a mother's instinct, that he was avoiding my gaze even over the phone line. "Mom, look, it was just an intimate thing," he said, the words rushing out fast. "Very small, just the 2 of us and the witnesses. Really quick courthouse thing. We didn't want to make a fuss." I stood there, listening to the son I had raised, the boy I had nursed through fevers and held through nightmares, lie to me. Blatantly. Cowardly. "I see," was all I could manage to say. "We'll celebrate later, okay? Love you. Gotta go." Click. The dial tone hummed in my ear, a lonely, monotonous sound, but I knew it was a lie. Deep down in my gut, where the truth always lives, I knew. And because I knew, I did the thing that would break my own heart completely. I opened my laptop. I logged onto social media. It didn't take long. There they were, the photos. It wasn't a quick courthouse thing. It was a beautiful outdoor ceremony in a garden. I sat there at my kitchen table, the screen blurring through tears I didn't even know I was crying, and I scrolled. I saw Lena. She looked stunning, I have to admit. She was wearing a gorgeous white lace gown, a gown I recognized immediately because 2 months ago I had given her $800 for personal expenses when she came to me crying about being short on cash. I had bought the dress that excluded me. I scrolled further. I saw Lena's parents. They were beaming, posing proudly on either side of the bride and groom, her mother wearing a corsage. I saw Lena's siblings, laughing, holding up glasses of champagne for a toast. I saw friends of theirs I barely knew. I saw Max's old college roommate. There were at least 30 people in those photos. 30 special people. I saw the cake. I saw the flowers. I saw the joy on everyone's faces. A joy I was explicitly, deliberately forbidden from sharing. I saw everything I wasn't supposed to see. That night, I didn't eat. I didn't turn on the lights. I just sat in the dark living room, staring at the closet door where the pink dress hung like a ghost. I didn't sleep. I just replayed those words over and over, letting them carve a canyon into my heart. Only special people. You would think that was rock bottom. You would think that after devastating someone like that, you would give them space. You would have the decency to feel shame. But shame is a currency my son and his wife do not deal in. A week went by. 7 days of me moving through my house like a zombie. 7 days of silence from them. Exactly 1 week later, my phone rang again. It was Lena. I almost didn't answer. My hand hovered over the decline button. But old habits die hard. The habit of being available, of being the safety net, is a hard addiction to break. I answered. "Hello?" Her voice was totally different. Gone was the chilling, arrogant woman who had dismissed me a week ago. Now she sounded frantic, high-pitched, desperate, almost pleading. "Renata! Oh my God, Renata! Finally, you answered!" I said nothing. I just listened to her breathe heavily on the other end. "Renata, we have a huge problem," she rushed on. "The rent is overdue. We totally forgot with the wedding and everything. The landlord just called Max and he's furious. He says if we don't pay by tomorrow, he's going to start eviction proceedings. We don't have it right now. You forgot to make the usual transfer." Her voice trembled at the end, a perfect performance of a damsel in distress, as if the world were ending because their free ride was late. "You forgot to transfer the 500, she repeated, slightly accusatory now. I held the phone away from my ear for a second, staring at it in disbelief. The sheer audacity, it was breathtaking. A week after telling me I wasn't special enough to witness their marriage, a week after shattering my heart, she was calling me for money, as if nothing had happened, as if I were just a banking app that had glitched. I sat there in silence for a few profound seconds. The silence on the line stretched taut. In that silence, I remembered. I remembered all the times over the last 3 years that I had run to the bank on my lunch break, skipping my own meal, to make sure that transfer went through on time so they wouldn't feel stressed. I remembered the times I had canceled dinner plans with my friends because Max had called with some emergency that required my time or my wallet. I remembered the weeks I had eaten nothing but beans and rice, stretching every dollar of my own budget, just so I could give them extra money for their desires, a weekend trip, a new gadget, things I would never dream of buying for myself. I had eaten beans so they could eat steak, and now, after excluding me from the most important moment of their lives, they had the nerve to call me because the check was late. Something inside me, something hot and hard that I hadn't felt in years, began to rise up my throat. "Lena," I said. My voice surprised me. It wasn't the shaky, tearful voice of the previous week. It was calm, deadly calm. It sounded like the voice of a stranger, a very strong stranger. "Lena," I repeated, looking out the window at my own garden, which I had neglected while tending to theirs. "Didn't I warn you?" "Warn me? What do you mean?" she stammered, confused by my tone. I took a slow breath, savoring the moment. "Didn't I warn you? That I only help special people?" Let the impact of the line sink in. The silence on the other end of the line was so deep, so absolute, that I could hear the blood rushing in my own ears. I could hear my own heart beating, strong and steady. For the first time in years, maybe for the first time since my husband died, it was not I who was trembling. It was her. I could hear her quick, shallow breaths. She was stunned. The ATM had just spoken back. "Renata, I don't understand," she stuttered, her voice losing that fake confidence. "What are you saying? We were always special to you. You always say I'm like a second mom to you. You can't be serious." Lies. All lies. Wrapped in that saccharine, sweet voice she only used when she needed something. The same voice she used to ask for money for the wedding dress she wore in the photos I wasn't in. The same voice she used to ask for help with the honeymoon I wouldn't hear about. For so many years, I realized in that moment, I had been walking on eggshells in my own life, weighing every word I said to them, every gesture, every gift, hoping that if I just gave enough, if I was just quiet enough and compliant enough, I might get a crumb of genuine affection from my own son. I was the perfect mother, the obliging, silent mother-in-law, the provider who never protested when they treated me like I was invisible until they needed my debit card. But that phrase, "only special people," it had awakened something in me, something that had been dormant for far, far too long. A beast of self-preservation had woken up, and it was hungry. I didn't bother responding to her sputtering. I just gently, quietly hung up the phone. That night, I didn't cry. I sat on my bed in the dark, yes, but the tears that came were not the hot tears of sadness or grief. They were cold tears, tears of pure, accumulated rage, tears of years of silently endured humiliation. I cried for every time they made me feel that my love was a burden to them, but my money was essential. I cried for the foolish woman I had been. I cried for the mother who had lost herself entirely, trying so desperately to be indispensable to people who considered her completely dispensable. I fell asleep exhausted, not from sorrow but from anger. When I woke up the next morning, the world looked different. The light coming through the window seemed sharper, colder. Something inside me had fundamentally shifted during the night. It wasn't just the pain of betrayal anymore. It had calcified into something harder, something like steel. I stood up and walked into the bathroom. I looked at myself in the mirror. I saw a woman of 71. I saw the tired eyes, yes, the wrinkles that told the stories of 40 years of marriage, of widowhood, of raising a son alone. Years of giving love without asking for a return receipt. But this morning, there was something else in my gaze, a hardness I didn't recognize, a glint of iron determination that had been buried under decades of compliance and being nice. I looked at that woman in the mirror and I said aloud, "No more." I went to the kitchen and made coffee, just as I had every morning for 40 years. The routine was the same, but the intention was different. Usually, while the coffee brewed, I would think about calling Max. Just a quick check-in. How did you sleep, honey? Do you need anything today? Today, the thought didn't even cross my mind. Usually, I would check my phone first thing, a pathetic little hope rising in my chest that maybe there was a message from him, an apology, a picture, anything. Today, I left my phone in the bedroom. For the first time in a very long time, I was my own first concern of the day. I sat at my kitchen table with my black coffee. This table, it had witnessed so much. I had planned birthday surprises for them here. I had counted out cash for their emergencies here. I had sat here and cried silently when they forgot Mother's Day, again. Now this table would be a witness to something completely different, a reckoning. I got up and went to my small home office corner. I retrieved my checkbook, 3 years of bank statements, and a calculator. I sat back down. I was going to do the math. I didn't want vague feelings anymore. I wanted cold, hard facts. I wanted to see, in exact numbers, the quantifiable extent of my own foolishness. I opened the first statement, 3 years ago, the month they moved into that apartment. I started punching numbers into the calculator. Monthly rent, $500, multiplied by 36 months. That's $18,000. $18,000 just to keep a roof over their heads that I wasn't welcome under. I kept going, flipping pages, my finger tracing the lines of withdrawals that used to fill me with pride at being able to help, and now just filled me with nausea. Groceries and supplies. I estimated a low average, $200 a month, another $7,200. Gifts. Birthdays, Christmases, anniversaries. I was always generous, too generous. At least $3,000 over 3 years. Lena's medical emergencies, the times she needed cash for spas or vague treatments my insurance wouldn't cover. $800 here, $400 there. Let's say $1,500 total. The car loan down payment they borrowed 2 years ago and swore they'd pay back within 6 months. They never mentioned it again. $2,500. The air conditioner repair in their apartment last summer when they were too broke to fix it and it was hot. $600. The living room furniture, that's sectional. $1,200. I hit the equals button. The number stared back at me in stark, black, digital liquid crystal. $33,400. I stared at it. $33,400. That was the exact sum of my generosity. The price tag of my attempt to buy their love. $33,400 I had taken from my late husband's inheritance. Money Robert had worked himself to the bone for, so I could live my last years in peace, not financing ingrates. Money from my own small pension. Savings I had put aside, penny by penny, from decades of honest work as a bookkeeper. All that money thrown out the window to keep 2 capable adults comfortable. 2 adults who couldn't even pretend to respect me enough to invite me to their wedding. I was looking at that number, feeling sick, when my phone started buzzing from the bedroom. I let it ring. It stopped. It started ringing again immediately. I got up slowly, walked into the bedroom, and looked at the screen. Max. Normally, my heart would have pounded. I would have run to answer, a pathetic hope rising that maybe he would finally apologize. Maybe he would explain it was all a terrible misunderstanding, but today, I looked at his name on the screen and felt nothing. Just a profound, exhausting weariness. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times. Finally, it fell silent. I walked back to the kitchen and kept drinking my cold coffee as if nothing had happened. 10 minutes later, it rang again. Lena. I let it ring too. I imagined her frustration on the other end. She wasn't used to not getting what she wanted immediately. Then a text message pinged. It was from Max. Mom, please answer. The landlord is calling again. We really need to talk. It's urgent. I read it. I looked at the word urgent. Every time they needed money, it was urgent. My needs were never urgent. I deleted the message without replying. At 2 in the afternoon, the silence in the house was making me restless. I decided to go for a walk. I hadn't done that in months, just walked for the sake of walking. Usually if I left the house, it was for a purpose related to them, the bank for transfers, the supermarket to buy them something they needed, the pharmacy to pick up Lena's prescriptions because she was too tired. Today I walked just because I wanted to feel the air on my face. I walked past the neighborhood park where I used to take Max when he was little. I paused by the swings. I remembered that sweet, chubby-faced boy who used to run to me with scraped knees, who hugged me tight and told me I was the best mommy in the whole world. Where had that boy gone? When had he become this man who treated me like an ATM with feelings, and inconvenient feelings at that? When did I start confusing providing for him with loving him? When did I start to believe that I had to literally buy my own son's affection? My feet, acting on old habits, carried me toward the town center. I found myself standing in front of the bank. I stopped in front of the glass doors. I saw Mr. Klein, the branch manager, inside. He was sitting at his desk near the window. He looked up, saw me standing there, and gave a polite wave. I had known Mr. Klein for 15 years. He was a good man. He had processed every one of my transfers to Max and Lena. He had watched my savings account drain month after month to fill theirs. He never said anything, but sometimes I saw a flicker of pity in his eyes. I took a deep breath, pushed open the heavy glass door, and walked straight to his desk. "Mrs. Richter," he said pleasantly, standing up. "Good afternoon. Are you here to make the transfer? You're a few days late, isn't that right?" I sat down in the chair opposite him. I placed my hands on his desk to stop them from shaking. "No, Mr. Klein," I said firmly. "I am not here to make a transfer." He looked confused. "Oh? How can I help you then?" I looked him right in the eye. "I need to cancel the automatic transfers I have programmed to Max Richter. All of them. Immediately." Mr. Klein blinked. He looked genuinely surprised. For 3 years, those transfers had been as regular as the sunrise. "Are you sure, Mrs. Richter?" he asked gently. "Did something happen? It's very unlike you." His concern was genuine. It struck me that this bank manager, who barely knew me beyond financial transactions, was showing more genuine concern for my well-being in 10 seconds than my son had shown in 6 months. "Yes, I'm sure," I said. "What happened is that I finally opened my eyes, Mr. Klein. I want to cancel everything. And—" I paused, a new thought occurring to me. "I also want information on how to protect my accounts. I don't want anyone else, anyone, to have access to my money or information about my balance." He nodded slowly, a look of understanding dawning on his face. "I understand completely. We can set up extra security protocols right now." While Mr. Klein typed away on his keyboard, processing the cancellations that would cut my son's financial lifeline, my phone in my purse started buzzing again. It was relentless. Bzz, bzz, bzz. Max. Then Lena. Then Max again. It was as if they had developed a radar to detect the exact moment their source of income was being threatened. They could feel the money slipping away. I reached into my purse and turned the phone off completely. Silence. "Mrs. Richter," Mr. Klein said softly as he pushed some papers toward me to sign. "I apologize for intruding, but in all these years I have seen you be very generous with your family, extremely generous. I hope you are not being pressured to make these changes now." His words touched me deeply. I felt a sting of tears, but I blinked them back. "I'm not being pressured, Mr. Klein," I said as I signed my name with a flourish, severing the financial umbilical cord. "On the contrary, for the first time in a long time, I have finally stopped pressuring myself." When I walked out of that bank 20 minutes later, the air tasted sweeter. I felt strangely light, physically lighter, as if I had left an enormous, invisible burden sitting in Mr. Klein's office. For the first time in 3 years, my money was entirely mine again. I had zero financial obligations to people who saw me as a resource instead of a human being. I drove home slowly, window down. I thought about all the things I hadn't done in the last few years to please Max and Lena, the trips I hadn't taken to save money for their furniture, the old friends I no longer saw because I was always on call for their emergencies, the hobbies, painting, gardening, that I had given up because every dollar I spent on myself felt selfish, felt like $1 less for their needs. I turned onto my street. My little house, the one my husband and I had bought 40 years ago, came into view. And then my stomach dropped. The feeling of lightness vanished instantly, replaced by a cold dread. There were cars in my driveway, 3 of them. I recognized Max's sedan. I recognized Lena's little red compact car, the one I helped pay the insurance on. But there was a 3rd car, a sleek, dark gray luxury sedan that I didn't recognize at all. My blood ran cold. They were here, and they had brought someone. I pulled up slowly behind their cars. I could see movement inside my house through the front picture window, shadows pacing back and forth in my living room. They had keys. Of course they had keys. I had given them keys years ago because I trusted them, because I thought, foolishly, that one day they might need to get in to take care of me, just as I had always taken care of them. Instead, they had used those keys to invade my sanctuary the moment I stopped dispensing cash. I sat in my car for a moment, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I wanted to back out of the driveway and just drive away, escape. But then I looked in the rearview mirror. I saw those eyes again, the eyes of the woman who had woken up this morning and decided, no more. I took a deep, shuddering breath. It was time. It was time for the first real confrontation of my new life. I got out of the car, slammed the door shut, and walked up the path to my own front door. I put my key in the lock, turned it, and pushed the door open. The scene that greeted me stopped me in my tracks. It is a scene I will never, ever forget. Max was sitting on my sofa, his head buried in his hands, elbows on his knees. He looked up as I entered, his face a mask of stress and anger. Lena was pacing back and forth in front of the fireplace like a caged animal, her arms crossed tightly. And sitting at my dining room table, my table, where I had done the math this morning, was an older man I didn't know. He was wearing an expensive-looking gray suit, and spread out across the table in front of him were my papers, my bank statements, my personal documents that I had left out this morning. He was going through them. "What is happening here?" My voice rang out in the room, louder and steadier than I expected. It bounced off the walls of the home I had paid for, the home I had maintained, the home they were currently defiling. All 3 of them jumped. Max's head snapped up. Lena froze mid-step. And the stranger in the gray suit, Mr. Fisher, as I would soon learn, stopped shuffling my bank statements, his hand hovering over my private financial history like a vulture over a carcass. They looked at me, the owner of the house, as if I were the intruder, as if I were the inconvenience interrupting their important business. Lena was the first to recover. She always was the quickest to pivot. Her face shifted instantly from annoyance to that fake, frantic concern I was beginning to despise. "Renata!" she gasped, rushing toward me but stopping just short of touching me when she saw the look on my face. "Thank God you're here. We've been so worried. We've been calling and calling." "Worried?" I repeated, walking past her into the room. I kept my eyes locked on the stranger. "Is that why you broke into my house? Is that why this man is reading my private bank statements?" "Mrs. Richter," the man said, standing up and smoothing his tie. He had a smile that didn't reach his eyes, a shark smile. He extended a hand that I ignored completely. "I am Dr. Fisher. I'm a specialist in geriatric family law and cognitive assessment. Your children asked me to come by to assess the situation." "My situation?" I asked, my voice dangerously low. "The only situation here is that 3 people have broken into my home. I am doing perfectly fine." Max finally stood up. He looked terrible, pale, sweaty, eyes shifting nervously. He looked like a man whose lifeline had been cut and was currently suffocating. "Mom, please," he said, his voice taking on that condescending, slow tone one uses with a toddler or a dementia patient. "We went to the bank. Mr. Klein told us you canceled everything. He said you blocked our access. You even asked for security protocols against us." "And?" I challenged. "And that's not normal behavior, Mom," Max shouted, his frustration cracking through the mask of concern. "You don't just cut off your family. You don't just stop paying bills you've paid for years without an explanation. We think you're confused. We think you might be having an episode." An episode. The word hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. I looked at them. I really looked at them. A week ago, I wasn't special enough to be at their wedding. Today, because I closed my checkbook, I was mentally unstable. The narrative had shifted so fast it made my head spin. They weren't just greedy, they were gaslighting me. They were rewriting reality to suit their financial needs. I am not confused, I said, enunciating every syllable with crystal clarity. I am clearer than I have been in years, and you, I pointed a shaking finger at the lawyer, you are going to leave my house, right now. Mr. Fisher didn't move. He just sighed, a professional, weary sigh. Mrs. Richter, I understand you feel overwhelmed, but your children have a legal right to intervene if they believe your ability to make financial decisions is impaired. They have documented several concerning behaviors. I let out a laugh. It was a harsh, raspy sound. Concerning behaviors? Like what? Deciding that my money belongs to me? Deciding not to finance the lifestyle of two adults who treat me like trash? Lena stepped forward, her face twisting. The mask of the concerned daughter-in-law slipped, revealing the predator underneath. We never treated you like trash, Renata. You are family, but family supports each other. Everything you have. She paused, and then she said the quiet part out loud. The truth she had probably whispered to Max in the dark for years. Everything you have will belong to us one day anyway. We are just speeding up the process to ensure it's managed correctly. A moment of total shock. There it was, the naked, unvarnished truth. In their minds, I was already dead. I was just a placeholder, a temporary custodian of their money. It didn't matter if I had 20 years left to live. To them, I was a ghost haunting their inheritance. I was an ATM with legs that had malfunctioned. The cruelty of it took my breath away. But strangely, it also gave me strength. The ambiguity was gone. Out, I said. Renata, listen, Lena started. Out, I screamed. The sound tore from my throat, primal and fierce. All three of you, get out of my house before I call the police and have you arrested for trespassing. Max stood up straight, his face reddening with anger. Mom, we can't just leave. We have obligations, the rent, the car payments, the credit card you co-signed for. You can't just cut us off from one day to the next. It's irresponsible. I can't? I walked over to the door and flung it wide open. The afternoon light spilled in, harsh and revealing. Who says I can't? For 3 years, I paid rent on a lease that isn't in my name. I filled a fridge in a kitchen where I wasn't welcome. I financed a wedding I wasn't invited to. Mr. Fisher tried one last tactic. He pulled a folder from his briefcase and placed it gently on the table. Mrs. Richter, we have prepared some documents. A limited power of attorney. It would allow Max and Lena to manage the day-to-day finances, just temporarily, until you feel better. It would save everyone a lot of legal trouble. I walked over to the table. I picked up the folder. I looked at it for a second. Then, I walked to the kitchen trash can, stepped on the pedal, and dropped the folder onto the coffee grounds and eggshells from this morning. The only transition happening here, I said, pointing to the open door, is you transitioning to the street. Lena started to cry, but they weren't the tears of a heartbroken daughter. I knew the difference now. These were tears of frustration, tears of rage, tears of a spoiled child who has been told no for the first time. You can't do this to us, Renata, she sobbed, her face ugly and twisted. We made plans. We bought things. We took on debt because we knew we could count on you. You counted on my money, I corrected her coldly, not on me. Now get out. Defeated, for now, they started to file out. Max stopped at the door. He turned to look at me. He was no longer the boy I raised. He was a 35-year-old stranger with debt and a cruel wife. Mom, he said, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper, this is going to end very badly for you. You're going to end up alone. You'll have no one to take care of you when you really need it. You're making a mistake. I looked him in the eye. My heart was breaking, but my spine was steel. Max, I said with deep sadness, I am already alone. The difference is, now it's by my own choice, not by your neglect. I slammed the door in his face. I locked it, then I slid the deadbolt home. I stood in the hallway, leaning my forehead against the cool wood of the door. My hands were shaking uncontrollably now that the adrenaline was fading. I was alone. But as I stood there, listening to the silence of my house, I realized something. It was a beautiful silence. It wasn't empty. It was free. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, planning. I felt like a general on the eve of battle. Max's threat, "This is going to end badly for you," echoed in my mind. They wouldn't stop. I knew them. They were desperate, and desperate people are dangerous. If they wanted a war, I would give them one. But I wouldn't fight with emotion. I would fight with intelligence. At 8 a.m. the next morning, I was already in action. My first stop was the hardware store. Mr. Summer, the owner, greeted me warmly. "Mrs. Richter, another emergency repair for the kids' apartment?" he asked, knowing the routine. "No, Mr. Summer," I said. "This time it's for my house. I need to change every lock, today, and I need the best security system you have. Cameras, motion sensors, everything." He looked surprised, but he asked no questions. His son, Ethan, was at my house within the hour. While Ethan drilled and hammered, installing the armor around my new life, I sat at my kitchen table and made the most important call of my life. I called Mr. Weber. Mr. Weber was my estate lawyer. He had handled my husband's will years ago. He was an honorable man, specialized in elder law. "Renata," he said when I arrived at his office later that morning. I had told him everything: the wedding, the money, the break-in, the threat of mental incompetence. He sat back in his leather chair, his face grim. "What your children tried to do yesterday is more common than you think," he said gravely. "It's a textbook move. When the financial supply is cut, the abuser attacks the competence of the victim. It's called elder financial abuse, Renata. And entering your home without permission to access your financial documents, that borders on criminal." His words terrified me, but they also validated me. I wasn't crazy. I was a victim. "We have to document everything," Mr. Weber instructed, pulling out a yellow legal pad. "Every transfer, every gift, every text message where they asked for money. And we need to change your will, immediately. We need to ensure that if anything happens to you, they cannot touch a dime." We spent 3 hours reviewing my records. Mr. Weber actually whistled low when he saw the total: $33,400. "With this money," he murmured, shaking his head, "you could have traveled the world. You financed a fantasy, Renata." "I know," I whispered. When I left his office, I felt armed. I had a lawyer. I had a new will. I had a security system. But the emotional siege was just beginning. Over the next few days, my phone became an instrument of harassment. I had blocked their numbers, so they started calling from unknown numbers. They used friends' phones. I developed a new skill: ignoring. Then came the love bombing. One afternoon, a letter appeared in my mailbox. No stamp, dropped off by hand. It was from Lena. "Renata, please. We need to talk like civilized adults. We are so sorry about the wedding. It was a mistake. Max was stressed. I was nervous. We want to make it up to you. Let us come over for dinner. We can cook together like we used to. We miss you." I read it standing by my new security cameras. "We miss you," I read aloud. I knew what they missed. They missed the rent payment. They missed the groceries. I tore the letter into tiny pieces and threw it in the recycling bin. But they didn't stop. They escalated. On a Friday morning, I was painting in my garden, something I hadn't done in years, when the doorbell rang. I checked the camera app on my phone. It wasn't Max. It wasn't Lena. It was a young woman, dressed professionally, holding a clipboard. She looked serious. I walked to the door but didn't open it. I spoke through the intercom. "Yes?" "Mrs. Renata Richter?" the woman asked. "Who is asking?" "I am Mrs. Schmidt. I am a social investigator from the Office of Senior Services." My blood ran cold. The paintbrush fell from my hand. Government. They had called the government on me. "We received a report," Mrs. Schmidt continued, her voice distorted by the speaker, "that you may be in an at-risk situation. We need to conduct a wellness check." I opened the door. I had to. Refusing would look suspicious. Mrs. Schmidt walked in, her eyes scanning my house. Checking for hoarding? Checking for filth? Checking for signs of the dementia my son had surely reported. She sat on my sofa. "Mrs. Richter," she began, clicking a pen, "we have received reports from concerned family members. They claim you have shown drastic changes in financial behavior, that you have cut off contact with your support system, that you are displaying paranoia, installing security systems you don't need." I sat across from her. I sat very straight. "Mrs. Schmidt," I said calmly, "can I ask you a question?" "Go ahead." "If a person stops giving money to people who abuse them, is that insanity? Or is that sanity?" She blinked. "I called my lawyer, Mr. Weber, before I let you in." I lied. Well, partially. I had texted him. "He is on his way, but I can tell you this right now. The family that called you are the same people who excluded me from their wedding because I wasn't special enough, but who have taken $33,000 from me in 3 years. Mrs. Schmidt stopped writing. She looked up. $33,000? Would you like to see the bank statements? I asked. I have them ready. I spent the next hour showing her everything, the transfers, the receipts, the text messages from Lena begging for cash. By the time Mr. Weber arrived, Mrs. Schmidt looked furious, not at me, at them. "This is a weaponization of protective services," she said, closing her folder with a snap. "Mrs. Richter, you are lucid, your home is immaculate, and your financial decisions seem extremely rational given the context. I am closing this case immediately." When she left, I felt a surge of triumph. I had won the battle. But as Mr. Weber warned me, I hadn't won the war. "Renata," he said, standing in my driveway as the sun went down, "they are desperate. The social services attempt failed, the love bombing failed, the threats failed." "So it's over?" I asked hopefully. He shook his head. "No, this means they have only one card left to play, the nuclear option." "What is that?" "Guardianship," he said darkly. "They can sue you in family court. They can try to legally strip you of your rights. They can argue that you are incompetent and ask a judge to give max control over your assets." "But I'm sane," I cried. "Mrs. Schmidt just saw that." "It doesn't matter," he said. "If they find a doctor willing to testify and if they paint a convincing enough picture, they can drag you through hell." I went to bed that night feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. A week passed, a week of quiet, and then it arrived. I was drinking coffee on my patio, watching the birds. The doorbell rang. A man in a uniform stood there, not a mailman, a process server. "Renata Richter?" "Yes." He handed me a thick envelope. "You have been served." He walked away. I sat on my porch step, my hands trembling as I tore open the envelope. In the Circuit Court of Family Law. Petition for guardianship of an incapacitated adult. Petitioner, Maximilian Richter. Respondent, Renata Richter. The letters swam before my eyes. My son, my baby boy, the boy I had held in my arms. He was suing me. He was formally asking a court to declare me mentally incompetent, to take away my checkbook, to take away my freedom, to take away my life. I looked up at the sky. A single tear rolled down my cheek. It was the last tear I would shed for Max. I stood up. I wiped the tear away. "Okay," I whispered to the empty air. "You want to prove I'm crazy? I'll show you exactly how sane and how dangerous I can be." The war was no longer coming. The war was here. The morning of the trial broke gray and cold. It was fitting. I woke up at 5 a.m. I didn't need an alarm. Panic and adrenaline had been my coffee for the last 3 weeks. I stood in front of my mirror, looking at the woman who was about to be put on display. I chose my outfit like armor, a sharp black suit, a white silk blouse, pearls. I pulled my hair back tight. I looked severe. I looked rich. But most importantly, I looked sane. Today, 12 strangers, or a judge in this case, would decide if I was a person or a piece of property. Today, My dignity was on the docket. Mr. Weber arrived at 7 a.m. He looked tired but ready. "Renetta," he said, handing me a thick file. "Remember the strategy. You are not the angry mother. You are not the heartbroken widow. You are the prudent financial manager. You are the CEO of your own life. Let them be emotional. You be ice." "I can be ice," I promised. We drove to the courthouse in silence. When we walked into the lobby, I saw them immediately. Max was wearing a suit I had never seen before, probably bought on a credit card he expected me to pay off eventually. Lena was dressed entirely in black, looking somber, like a grieving widow. It was a performance. She was dressed for the funeral of my autonomy. When our eyes met, Max looked away instantly, staring at his shoes. Cowardice is a hard habit to break. But Lena? Lena held my gaze. Her eyes were cold, flat, and hard. There was no family left in those eyes, just calculation. She looked at me the way a butcher looks at a side of beef, estimating the yield. We walked into the courtroom. The smell of old wood and floor polish hit me. It smelled like judgment. Their lawyer was a man named Mr. Sterling. He was smooth, polished, the kind of lawyer who smiles with his teeth but not his eyes. He specialized in this kind of thing, stripping the elderly of their rights under the guise of protection. Judge Miller entered. He was an older man, stern-faced, with glasses perched on the end of his nose. He didn't look like someone who tolerated nonsense. "All rise," the bailiff called. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. This is it, I thought. This is where it ends. Mr. Sterling began his opening statement. It was a masterclass in fiction. "Your Honor," he began, his voice dripping with faux compassion, "this is a tragedy of a loving family watching their matriarch crumble. Mrs. Renata Richter has been the rock of this family for decades. But in recent months, something broke." He gestured to me as if I were a broken vase. "She has become erratic, paranoid. She has cut off the son she adores. She has barricaded herself in her home with security systems fit for a fortress. She spends her days with strangers, ignoring the family that loves her. We are not here to take her money, Your Honor. We are here to save her from herself. We are asking for guardianship to ensure Mrs. Richter is safe." It was convincing. If I didn't know me, I would have believed him. Then, the parade of witnesses began. First, they called Lena. She took the stand, clutching a tissue she didn't need. "Mrs. Richter has always been like a second mother to me," she testified, her voice trembling perfectly on cue. "But after the wedding, she changed. She started screaming at us. She accused us of stealing. She doesn't remember things. She forgot she promised to pay our rent. She forgot our agreements." "And how did this impact you?" Sterling asked gently. "It's heartbreaking," Lena sobbed, dabbing at dry eyes. "We just want her back. We want to make sure she doesn't spend all her savings on scams or people manipulating her." Mr. Weber stood up for cross-examination. He adjusted his glasses. "Mrs. Schuster," he said, using her maiden name intentionally, "you say you want her back. Did you want her at your wedding?" Lena froze. "Excuse me?" "The wedding. The one you testified caused her decline. Was she invited?" "It was small, intimate." "Did you tell her, and I quote, 'we only invited special people'?" "That was taken out of context," Lena snapped, her sadness vanishing instantly, replaced by a flash of anger. "I see," Weber said calmly. "And this heartbreak you feel? Did it start before or after she stopped paying your $500 monthly rent?" "Objection!" Sterling shouted. "Sustained," the judge said, but I saw him look at Lena. He saw the flash of anger. The mask had slipped, just for a second. Next was Max. Seeing my son on that stand was the hardest moment of my life. He looked small. "My mom she's not herself," Max mumbled. "She's being influenced by these new friends, neighbors, people who don't know her like I do. I'm just worried she's going to end up destitute." Weber's cross-examination of Max was brutal and swift. "Mr. Richter, are you currently employed?" I'm between jobs," consulting. And in the last 3 years, how much money has your destitute mother given you? I don't know the exact figure. Let me help you, Weber said, holding up a document. $33,400. Does that sound correct? Max turned red. She helped us. That's what mothers do. And when the money stopped, the lawsuit started. Is that the timeline? It's not about the money, Max shouted, losing his cool. She's crazy. She installed cameras. Who does that? A woman who had intruders break into her home to steal her financial documents, Weber replied icily. Intruders who looked exactly like you. Then, they played their trump cards, the independent witnesses. Mr. Davis, the grumpy neighbor from across the street. He testified that I yelled at people and acted strange. Mr. Green, my pharmacist. I held my breath as Mr. Green took the stand. I knew Lena had tricked him. Mr. Green, Sterling asked, did Mrs. Richter display erratic behavior regarding her medication? Mr. Green looked at me. Then he looked at Lena. He took a deep breath. Actually, Mr. Green said clearly, no. Sterling paused. Excuse me? You signed a statement. I signed a statement because that woman, he pointed a shaking finger at Lena, told me it was for insurance purposes. She lied to me. Mrs. Richter is my most compliant patient. She takes vitamins and aspirin. She is perfectly lucid. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Lena went pale. Then it was our turn. We didn't need many witnesses. We had the truth. Dr. Moore, the psychiatrist I had seen, took the stand. I conducted a 4-hour cognitive evaluation of Mrs. Richter, she stated, her voice authoritative. Not only does she not have dementia, but her cognitive processing speed is in the 90th percentile for her age. She is sharp, rational, and completely competent. Is she paranoid? Weber asked. Paranoia is an irrational fear, Dr. Moore said. Given that her family broke into her home and is currently suing her for her assets, I would diagnose her fear as highly rational. The judge actually cracked a small smile. Finally, Mr. Weber turned to me. I call Renata Richter to the stand. I walked to the witness box. I didn't look at Max. I looked at the judge. I swore to tell the truth. And oh, was I ready to tell it. Mrs. Richter? Weber asked softly. Why did you cut off your son? I took a breath. The room went silent. For 3 years, I began, my voice steady, projecting to the back of the room. I thought I was being a good mother. I thought love meant saying yes. I thought support meant writing checks. I paused, letting the silence hold the weight of my words. I paid their rent. I bought their food. I financed their vacations. I spent $33,400 of my late husband's legacy on them, and I did it gladly, because I thought we were a family. I turned to look at Max then. He was staring at the table, refusing to meet my eyes. Then came the wedding, the day I wasn't invited, the day I was told I wasn't a special person. And I realized something painful, Your Honor. I realized that I wasn't a mother to them. I was a resource. I was a utility. Like the electric company, you only notice them when the power gets cut off. Is that why you stopped the payments? Weber asked. Yes, I stopped because I finally respected myself enough to close the bank of Mom. And the moment I did, the very moment the money stopped, I went from being a beloved mother to a mentally incompetent invalid. That is not a medical diagnosis, Your Honor. That is a tantrum. A legal tantrum thrown by 2 adults who are terrified of having to pay for their own lives. Do you hate your son? Weber asked the risky question. No, I said softly. I love him. I love him enough to let him grow up. Finally. No further questions. I stepped down. The closing arguments were short. Sterling tried to salvage it, mumbling about protective measures. Mr. Weber simply said, This is not a guardianship case. This is an attempted robbery using the court system as the weapon. Don't let them pull the trigger. Judge Miller didn't even retire to his chambers. He stacked his papers. He took off his glasses. He looked directly at Max and Lena. In my 20 years on the bench, the judge said, his voice booming, I have seen many sad cases. But this This is particularly distasteful. Max shrank in his seat. The petitioners have provided zero credible evidence of incapacity. What they have provided is ample evidence of entitlement, manipulation, and deceit. Mr. Green's testimony regarding the falsified statement is particularly damning. I will be referring that matter to the district attorney for potential perjury charges. Lena gasped. The petition for guardianship is denied with prejudice. The judge slammed the gavel. Mrs. Richter is free to do whatever she pleases with her money, including burning it in the town square if she so chooses. Case dismissed. The courtroom erupted in movement. I sat there for a moment, just breathing. It was over. I stood up. Mr. Weber hugged me. You did it, Renata. I turned to leave. I had to pass their table. Max was standing there, looking shell-shocked. Lena was crying. Real tears this time. Tears of fear, because the judge had mentioned the district attorney. Max reached out a hand. Mom. I stopped. I looked at his hand, the hand I used to hold when he crossed the street. Goodbye, Max, I said. But what are we going to do? He whispered, panic in his eyes. The legal fees, the rent. I suggest you get a job, I said, or maybe two. I walked out of the courtroom doors and didn't look back. 6 months later. The air in Paris is different than the air at home. It smells of bread and rain. I am sitting in a small café in Montmartre. I have a sketchbook in front of me. I am drawing the flower shop across the street. I sold the house. Too many ghosts. Too many memories of Max in the hallway, of Lena in the living room. I sold it all. I took the money, my money, and I did exactly what I promised myself. I donated half of the proceeds to a legal defense fund for the elderly, specifically to help people fight abusive guardianships. Mr. Weber helps run it. And the rest? Well, I'm spending it. I traveled to Italy. I took a cooking class in Tuscany. Now I'm in Paris. Next month, I'm going to Greece. I have not heard from Max. I blocked the numbers, returned the letters unopened. I heard from a friend that Lena left him when the money truly ran out. I heard Max is working in a warehouse, living in a studio apartment. I hope he is. I hope he is learning. I hope he is becoming the man I failed to raise him to be by cushioning him too much. Sometimes, late at night, I miss the little boy he was, but I do not miss the man he became. I sip my coffee. It's rich and hot. I am 72 years old. I am alone in a foreign city. I have no family around me. And yet, I have never felt more complete. I realize that the special people Lena talked about, she was right. There are special people in this world, but you don't find them by buying them. You find them by being strong enough to stand on your own 2 feet. I close my sketchbook. I leave a generous tip for the waiter, because I want to, not because I have to. I walk out into the streets of Paris. The sun is shining. The road ahead is open. My name is Renata, and for the first time in my life, I belong entirely to myself. And that is priceless.